Abu Abdurrahman ibn Shu'aib. Correct? And where was this? Where is this attribution? Where he was born? This place is called Nasa. Do you remember where it is? It was at that time. No, Khurasan. Uzbekistan, modern day Uzbekistan. Khurasan at that time, which was a part of Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, all these areas, this is Central Asia, correct? So he was from there. طيب, ممتاز. Some students who skip his teachers, although his teachers, but we highlighted two of his most famous students. One of his Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, Abu Ja'far al-Hanafi, who famously wrote Mushkil al-Athar, which was a great book of hadith where he discusses the ilal hadith is one of the most okay, it's the most thousands of chains of narration book. That book memory narrations on the wording of the hadith and on the fiqhi ruling of those istinbatat, from hadith. So benefits you derive from. So Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, he wrote this book, and then of course he wrote and Aqidah Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah, and he specifically mentioned the Aqidah of Abu Hanifa, the Aqidah of Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, and his two main students, and his other student, and then so Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi being a famous student of Imam al-Nasa'i. We only mentioned two. This Abu Ali al-Naysaburi. Abu Ali, important. Why are we highlighting, or why did we highlight? I mentioned the reason. We highlighted Abu Ali al-Naysaburi. The reason is that Abu Ali, one of the main narrators of hadith, also he narrates much about the life of Imam al-Nasa'i. The most time with Imam al-Nasa'i rahimahullah, and so he narrates about Imam al-Nasa'i's life, and Imam al-Nasa'i rahimahullah ta'ala rahmatan wasi'ah. طيب, when did Imam al-Nasa'i? He's the last 6 Imams of Hadith. When did he die? Later. 4th century. 4th century means it has to be 300, yeah? Before. Now you're getting colder. A bit warmer. 305. Died in the year. He dies in the year 303 Hijrah. Very close kunya, Isa at-Tirmidhi, rahimahullah ta'ala. What is his name? Easy, but to me it's the easiest name to remember. Imam at-Tirmidhi. I told you guys I test you. You don't have to have it memorized. When I say I test you, I'm testing the precision of how you take notes. So if you memorize it, me jiddan, the thing. Ilm is what you memorize, okay? But that means you have Abu Isa at-Tirmidhi's name is Muhammad ibn Isa. Names his son or his father. He has a son named Isa. So his name is Muhammad, and his father's is also. So Muhammad ibn Isa ibn Usawr, but you don't have to remember that. Allah Ta'ala. Where is Tirmidh? This place he's from, Tirmidh. Where's Tirmidh? Same, also from modern day. And okay, although his asl, meaning his background, okay, which is in likely. You know, I had one of my students when I teach. I think she was in grade 4. One of my brightest students. She was very sweet, very well mannered. She was maybe a syndrome, whether it was Down syndrome or bright. And she asked me one day, said, "Brother, I talk a lot about these guys, even with." And so she asked me, "Brother, have conditions? Did they have like conditions? Were they Down syndrome? Were they on the spectrum?" And I said to her, and I did some research about it, and I realized I'm like, these are modern. These are modern, not modern. How do I should say? Modern problems, but these didn't exist 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, right? You were just odd. You were just demarcations. Not even like that older. Autism, we have Down syndrome, recent, right? But it's that those always exist. People with some sort of attention deficit disorder, which is amongst the psychological academia, anyways. But you know, these people had people who had phototypes. Imam Shafi'i famously had to cover part he was reading because he would. If you could see both, it was difficult for him to look at something and not memorize it. And it's the same thing with, for example, Abu Hurairah, but this was because the dua was years. Because he would walk through the market and memorize the argument between, right, or a fig, right? And then it was just like too much, right? Ala kulli hal. But what we should take away from this is that we're now approaching our third imam. So Central in descent, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, right? None of them so far are. So Abu Isa, Muhammad ibn Isa at-Tirmidhi, is teachers from the Imams and Shuyukh of Imam Bukhari. Same from the Shuyukh and teachers of Imam Bukhari, rahimahumullah, and others. From his famous students, does anybody remember? They're names that not a lot of people know. You note them down because these names come up often. So, for example, I said Abu Bakr, Ahmad ibn Ismail al-Samarqandi. Okay. Ahmad Ismail, or you could just write Abu Bakr al-Samarqandi. I said Al-Husayn ibn Yusuf al-Farbari. And you can tell from the names that they're not Arabs either. And Rabi' ibn Hayyan al-Bahili and others. Tayyib. I mentioned this. First, let's get the hard facts out of the way. When did Imam al-Tirmidhi die?
279.
Ahsant. He died in the year 279 Hijri. He died in the year 279 Hijri. No.
Just don't go into detail, but just for about a couple of minutes. I have asked this question from other students of knowledge. I want to share your habit. See, what have to say about wisdom in non-Arabs predominantly preserving the Sunnah? Now, to my knowledge, I do not know any besides but most of them, what is the wisdom? Would you like to?
There are others, there are very few. Ibn Hanbal, Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal al-Shaybani. Yeah, he's from the Arab. If you trace his lineage back, Shaybani. Lineage is not Arab. He was from Kufa, but he was not ethnically Kufan. Imam Muslim al-Hajjaj.
He's again from the Khorasan area, right?
I believe, yeah, Persian.
So only Malik was Madani, right? I mean, if you want to differentiate further, Malik was only one from Medina. All the others were outside.
Sure, that's fine. I mean, he was the Hijazi, if you want to say it like that, sure. But, there were other Arabs, but if you were to circle graph or a bar graph, and you were to number just pure Arab, how many scholars of Hadith are non-Arab? 100%. The non-Arab scholars of Hadith would outnumber the Arab scholars. There's no doubt about that. There's absolutely no doubt about the scholars of fiqh. You can see the scholars of Arabic.
Yeah.
The scholars of Arabic. I mentioned, I don't know which class it was, some classes ago, about Sibawayh. Sibawayh was, till today, he is the hujjah. He's hujjah. He is a proof in Arabic. When Sibawayh makes a comment about Arabic grammar or morphology or whatever it may be, is qawl or his statement, if he says something, then that's the default position. He was Persian. Yeah.
Even the books that were used in Medina University is from the Indian.
Yeah. Sheikh Abdurrahman V. Abdurrahman. He was, rahimahullah, passed away some years ago.
He was a reward.
He was a convert, I believe, as well. Yeah. Sheikh Dia al-Rahman
Azmi.
al-Azmi. He used to be the dean of my Kulit al-Hadith when I met him. He wrote, people don't really understand his level of knowledge. He wrote he compiled one of the largest, close to somewhere above 12 or 17,000 hadith, right? Where he compiled Sahih hadith. That's what he left behind. He was Hindu. He was born Hindu, I should say, rahimahullah. He was Brahmin Hindu, yeah. He was subhanAllah. Allah took him from there to Islam, to the alim of hadith, to the dean of the faculty of hadith in Medina. Right? So, this is the power of Islam. It's the power of Allah Azza wa Jal, transformative. Right? Perhaps, yeah. These are people we should be reading about. These are modern people. I met him, so he didn't die that long ago. Just a couple of years ago, he passed away. Rahimahullah. So, I met him at a wedding, I had a chance to sit with him, subhanAllah. But, and he was a very sweet, very kind man, May Allah Azza wa Jal bless him. Yeah, he was, subhanAllah, rahimahullah. Ala kulli hal. Tayyib, to answer your question, brother, the many wisdoms that we can point to for Allah Azza wa Jal choosing non-Arabs to preserve the religion of Islam is to show and prove to the world at large that Islam does not belong to the Arabs. The Arabic language doesn't belong to the Arabs. It doesn't, right? Imam, or I should say, Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu wardahu, he mentions, as it's narrated by Imam Ibn Abi Shayba, the Shaykh, collection of hadith called Al-Musannaf. It's from Imam or Amir al-Mu'mineen Umar bin Khattab with a sound chain narration. He says, تعلموا العربية, learn Arabic, فإنها من دينكم, for indeed it is a part of your religion. Right? People who are like, Arab, I don't need to. It doesn't mean you have to become Arab. There's more than 100 million Muslims in West Africa. Right? I have shuyukh from West Africa, Burkina Faso, and from Mali. Some of my main teachers, Sheikh Abdul Rahman Kuni, Hafidahullah. Right? I learned Arabic from him. He's the Sheikh of Arabic in Medina. If you want to learn Arabic in Medina, every Sheikh you go to will say, go to the African Sheikh. The Arab shuyukh send their children to him. He's black. He's as African as can. Learn with him in his house. So, Arabic belongs to the Muslims. We are the Muslims. Allah readied the Muslims to preserve the Arabic language. Wherever they were from, it didn't matter. There are many other, but one of the main benefits and the main wisdoms behind this is that Allah Azza wa Jalla showed that the religion of Islam does not belong to one ethnicity. Right? Suhaib al-Rumi was from, the Byzantine Empire, probably from northern Turkey. He's white as white can be, and Bilal ibn black can be. But there are brothers in Islam. There is no color, no race, tribes. None of that exists between the Muslims. Obviously, we don't forget, but that does not define who we are. What defines us is our connection to Allah, our connection to the Messenger of Allah, and our adherence to the Sharia of Allah and our taqwa. This is what defines us and what elevates one person above the other. Tayyib, I mentioned a story about Imam al-Tirmidhi that demonstrated the strength of his hifz. But for the sake of time, we're going to skip it, inshallah. Hopefully, you guys can go back and listen to the previous durus and inshallah benefit from that. Tayyib, we said Imam al-Tirmidhi died in the year 279. Rahimahullah ta'ala. Which one of these two Imams had 3 wives? Let's see who remembers that. Huh? Ahsan. Imam al-Nasa'i rahimahullah famously had 3 wives. Okay? It just goes to show that the scholars of Islam did not reject the practice of Rasulullah of ta'addud, of polygyny, right? And not for the sake of it. He famously was very good to his wives. He was known for this. He was good to his wives, and he kept them well. He kept them happy, and he took good care of them. And this is something I'm amazed at. Even some du'at, so-called du'at in the West, where they are afraid to talk about this subject because they're afraid of women. And then they stand up and they give khutbahs and they give durus, but you're scared of women. Na'udhu billah. I don't know what kind of man that is, but this is an odd thing. Okay, polygyny is a part of our religion, and we're not shy about it. Abuse of women is not. To threaten women with polygyny is not. Polygyny done according to the sunnah of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, that is a part of our religion. To honor your wife, right? To treat your wife with dignity and respect. Or your wives, right? Not to do things behind their backs, to DM women in their DMs, and to, marry women and not tell women the other. Sunnah of Rasulullah. I'm not talking about the validity of marriage. That's a fiqh issue. But you are the teachings of Rasulullah when you do things like this. I remember till today, one of the great shuyukh of Medina were sitting with him in the haram, and a man started asking my wife's back, and now I don't know what to do because this, that. He said anymore. He said, if you can't marry a woman, right? Like with your wife's full knowledge, then you're probably not ready to. You shouldn't be getting married to another woman. This is a very cowardice type of behavior, right? Are there exceptions to this rule? Probably. I throw my hands up. Okay, I'm not a judge anybody, but this is it turns women away from the beauty. Act right, or else I'll marry another woman, as if it's a punishment. Right? We do this. You do this with Quran. And if you better read your Quran, or else, right? Beat children, create association with the deen. This is not the beautiful and good. And I'm of Abdullah bin Abbas, and Allah knows best, but he said, "Khayrul ummati," best of this. The most one keeps them properly. If you are not a disciplined man, that means you're not keeping your. Most likely you have problems. And then if you have more than one wife and you're undisciplined, it's just somewhere. I guarantee you 100 million%. Because that must, and perseverance and hilm, forbearance, it two attitudes and two different sets of is a lot of work. Two is even more. So I encourage brothers always to encourage to if the proposition came, and believe me, my sisters, if any sisters are listening to this, You would want to be married to a man who could handle more than one woman. Right? Because that's Salat, Fajr, maybe even wakes up for Tahajjud. That man is distant this time. His anger, right? He's the one. I want a man who could. Right? That's just somebody who work on himself. He's done the time. طيب. So Imam Nasa'i from these past Imams, rahimahullah ta'ala, and he was famous. Actually, he was known amongst his community for being very well to him. He was implementing even though we're بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وصحبه ومن اتبع الهدى وبعد. So today we're talking about Imam Abu Dawood al-Sijistani, the great Imam, the great Hafiz Ibn al-Imam Ibn al-Ash'ath. Right? The Tashkil changes only because Bin is the same as the anglicized version of it. Anglicized version because they don't like to say Ibn. They say Bin, B-I-N. Bin Baz, same thing, Ibn Baz. So his name was Ibn S-H apostrophe A-T-H. All knows Abu Dawud. Sijistani al-Azdi, born in a place called Sijistan. In the year 202 Hijri. In the year 202 Hijri. Like a place in the Arab world as well. Abu Dawood, also Asia. Also from Central Asia. There are ulama and people of everywhere. My own Sheikh Abdullah ibn Abdul Rahim al-Bukhari, although he's mixed, he's family Pakistan. He is from Mali. He's from West Africa, from the teachers of Hadith. But Imam Sheikh al-Bani was Arab. He was from Medina, but his family left generations ago. Right? I great of Hadith from. There's not a lot of him in English. His family when the in the early 1900s opened up their borders and invited Mali. His travel to Israel. He didn't know what it was. He said, "Aswad." He said, I saw this weird animal. Its urine was black. دعوني أن أكب this animal. Right? The kid, his first encounter with Ansari. He just arrived to the outskirts of Riyadh. Riyadh just got electricity. He washed his clothes, wet clothes. He threw this on the clothes were dry. Because current dealing with different governments, German government. Job, Sheikh bin Baz used to give him money, right, that's stolen from the Muslim lands, and they were sitting in museums. And Germany and France are actually two of the most common manuscripts. Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah's books in Egypt. So he has probably one of the greatest libraries of manuscripts. Yeah. So with Sheikh Abdul Bari. It's a lot of politics, but that being this was his passion. It reinvigorate, right? Scribing and putting into print things that he found. There's lots of books that still not have been translated. We have the main corpus of hadith, 9, but there are other books of tafsir, like the book of tafsir is ma'thur. That is with chains of nails. It was burnt far, and we found many manuscripts of it now, and they've been piecing us 20. My entire time in student in hadith was a portion of Ayin Check. Of course, inshallah. Right? طيب as year traveled hadith, traveled from Sijistan, Central Asia, Syria, we call in English the Levant, Palestine, modern day. He traveled to Misr, Egypt. Then he traveled to Jazirat al-Arab, meaning the Arab Peninsula. That little right, he traveled to okay, and okay, world. The modern states of just It becomes a center of ilm. طيب, what was the aqidah of Imam Abu Dawood? The aqidah of Imam Abu Dawood was clearly he was upon al-aqidah, and this is very, if you read his son Abu Bakr al-Ha'i, a poem of al-Ha, the poem of the letter Ha, and the reason why stanza ends with the letter Ha. تمسك بحبل الله واتبع الهدى كتفلح والسنن التي أتت عن رسول تنجبح وهكذا. Every within السنن التي أتت عن رسول الله تنجو وتربح وقل غير مخلوق كلام مليكنا بذلك دان الأتقياء وأفصحوا. So this lines around 3 he sums up, right? You look at and he clearly shows from the shuyukh of Imam Abu Dawood Qa'nabi. I want you guys to write these names down. Scholar of hadith whose name will come up again and again.
Q or K?
Qaf. Q. عن القعنبي سليمان ibn Harb. Suleiman bin Harb. Abu al-Walid Rahawiya. No, teachers. His teacher. His Rahuya. Yeah. Of course, we cannot forget Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Hanbal is not the father of. You'll often see for the son to the father, don't put the adon in ilm al-imla, in the knowledge of, but it's not mutlaq, that's not without condition. Okay. If you attribute somebody other than their father, then you put the alif. It's an person you're attributing, like Ibn Taymiyyah. See Ahmad ibn Imam Ahmad's Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah's name was Ahmad. Was Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim. Taymiyyah was his grandmother. Taymiyyah was his brother. He was known as okay. Although his grandfather was old, okay, it wasn't his grandmother, maybe it was even his great grandmother. Allah alam. Ahmad's father's name was Muhammad. So his name is Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal. His Hanbal, that's from the Shuyukh, and the main showed لازمه, he was Imam Ibn Sa'id. You've heard this name before? You haven't heard this name before? Heard it before. Sitta. He's from the Imams of Hadith. They all learned from him. طيب, Yahya ibn Ma'in. Yahya ibn Ma'in, great Imam of Jarh wa Ta'deel, and criticizer of the chains of narrations. He was an Imam in that knowledge. He knew Muhaddith, la shak. Contemporaries. Yahya ibn Ma'in. Yeah.
Companions who were not with Ahmad.
Well, he was with him, but he was under duress. He folded under pressure, but not because he was weak, but because to save his life. Also, Ali ibn Abdullah al-Madini. There was no scholar other than one or two. One of them being Imam Ahmad, and then another one. So himself, the Aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, at least out loud, being jailed, being whipped to preserve the Aqeedah of Allah. But inshallah we'll Abu, right? Maybe Dawood are Imam Abu Isa Abu An-Nasa'i. He has to write down other than At-Tirmidhi and An-Nasa'i, Ibn al-A'rabi. Ibn al-A'rabi. Important, you can put it in brackets. Narrators. The reason why he's important, I need you guys to write his name down. He was from the main of, and my brothers and sisters listening, and the sisters on and on and on. From his students is his son Abu Bakr. I said just he wasn't strong in hadith, but he was strong in aqeedah. Okay. They tried. They tried. Although there were many that were destroyed. Also mass transmitted, meaning there were many copies of them. Right? As books. You know? Allah Ta'ala, he has a specific or a very mention where he the hadith chapters. Okay, so a sunan collection different from a jami' or a musnad because it has a specific juridical or jurisprudic order. Meaning, he doesn't just throw hadith together, he puts it together in a specific order of fiqh. So he begins with, for example, intention, and then he begins with tahara, right? Imam Malik how to determine the times of the prayers, right? So different fiqh books do it differently, right? He read his book and he presented it to Imam Ahmad, right? And Imam Ahmad istahsanahu, praised it, excellent, given, spent most time with Imam Ahmad in the ilm al-hadith, su'alat. These are literally a collection by a student to their teacher, and they're to do with hadith and which hadith came before which, nasikh and mansukh, meaning application. It is not. Okay, extensively. Okay, volume. This book is 4 volumes. Okay. Is Abi Dawood, the Imam Abu Dawood, that he asked him. These are gems when it comes to hadith. We have direct student-teacher conversations. I say about so in this chain of narration. Imam Ahmad says he's Syria, but when he's weak about cheerleader. He's good when he names his book. Remember, he makes mistakes. So Imam Ahmad and Imam Abu Dawood many years. We have those now books called Su'alat. His no problem.
You said Sunan is different from Jami and Muslim. That
Sunan, yeah.
yeah. So Muhammad not a part of the Sahih Sikh.
Well, it's not necessary. Just because is there. Bukhari had hundreds. There's no doubt that Imam Amir nobody right? Students. No one is equal to Imam. Most teachers had the only know his Sahih. Bukhari, we think Sahih. There's a long period. He wrote, which is, if you buy it, it's like 3 volumes, where he collects people's names. And he wrote, right? Which is, he wrote it on a refutation of the Qadariyya, Rafa' al-Yadayn, which is a collection of hadith where he shows the sunnah nature of raising the hands in the salah, right? Before and after the ruku' and standing up for the third rak'ah. He wrote where just a collection, a little bit less than that, benefits and virtues of being good to your parents, right? He wrote Al-Adab al-Mufrad, hadith where he only specifically talks about. He wrote many books, and I'm just saying these books because they're the well-known books. Although he wrote many other sounds, they're mafqood. We call them mafqood, meaning they're lost. You're burnt and lost. Only because they're referenced, they're talked to, right? Yeah, it's not wasted, not with him. Allah Azza wa Jal, right? Will reward him, inshallah. It might just go, right? Tayyib wrote, of course, his famous sunan, and it's been explained many times. The one who Abu Tayyib Muhammad Shams al-Haqq Mabadi, which explanation of Abu Dawood. Again, but Imam Abu Dawood also has so Ibn al-Qayyim has an explanation of this as an explanation of Abu Dawood. My brother, hadith, this is a very good question. I don't know how much time I have to get into it, but yeah, just like an ayah, hadith has context, right? Random hadith out of that's not deen. Deen is not just, this is where a lot of, if they're big bearded or small bearded, people get caught. Ma'at, whole or movements are big. It's not just Quran. My understanding, your understanding, Sheikh Fulan's understanding, right? Kullu has been behind him. Every group will say, I say sporty metaphor. I think it's this. How do we then, and the wrong understanding of the hadith, the right understanding of an ayah, or the wrong understanding, correct? Now this is ala fahm salaf al-salih comes into play. We take the Quran. The salaf are three: himself, alayhi salatu wasalam, and the Sahaba. Number one. Then we have the students of the Sahaba. Two. And then we have the Atba'u Tabi'een, which is generation number 3. Generation number what? Absolutely. You will find, and I don't encourage you to do. Some of us, unfortunately, are already exposed to this. Or that to find the Quran. Okay? But throughout their literature, everywhere, bila isnad in it, meaning tabi'i or period, full stop. Also, Sabil al-Mu'mineen. And who are the believers who is he speaking to? The Sahaba. Right? ومن يشاقق الرسول من بعد تبين له الهدى ويتبع غير سبيل المؤمنين فيه ما تواب. Has been made clear to that person, and he follows away, meaning that who? Sabil al-Quran. The Sahaba. We leave Jahannam وساءت مصيرا. Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4. So Allah says, other than the way of the Sahaba, we will leave that person to whatever. No other Sahabi opposes them. That's it. If I have a ruling from one Sahabi and no other Sahabi goes against him in that ruling, that's called ijma' sukuti. That's called a silent consensus. Silent consensus. That's hujjah. That's why Ibn al-Qayyim in his famous Nuniyah, he says, Al-ilmu qala Allah wa qala Rasuluhu wa qala as-sahaba laysa bit-tamween. And what his Sahaba said without reading. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, خير القرون أو خير أمتي generations are the best my generation. ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. And then those who come after them, and then those who come after them. من يعش فسيرى اختلافا كثيرا فعليه will see and find much in the sunnah of the come after me by on your molar teeth. So it's not just we need explanations of the hadith are extremely important. You people you give us. Say to you, you're a Wahhabi, you're a Nami, you're a... Okay, they're like... names don't mean anything, right? Saying, so you guys say just Quran and Sunnah, Quran and Sunnah. You just want to give everybody a copy of the Quran in Sahih Bukhari and tell them good luck? I said, who said that? No, you to find me a scholar. Find me a scholar of Ahl Sunnah who says, yeah, when James becomes Muslim, just give him the noble translation of the Quran, translation of Sahih Bukhari, and say, good luck, buddy, and how to make wudu and tahara. That's where the madhab come into place as well. Right? The madhab is not right. الدين التمذهب. Ibn Adam, right? And Najati, he said, having a part of the religion to adopt a madhab is a part of the religion. You can. صح ولا لا؟ And they down to the madhab. You can't be a Sunni Muslim unless you follow these four madhabs. Who said that? يعني من أسلفك في من said they would reject you. So even you'll see that they make what they call talfiq, which is a made-up word, which all words are made up, but it's a istilah, later word. Talfiq means that they will change their madhab based on where they are or what masjid they enter. Right? What does a Hanafi do if he comes to a non-Hanafi mosque at Asr time? Any Hanafi scholar worth their salt will tell you, you follow the madhab of the masjid, you pray with them. It was known. Far from it. I've studied the Hanafi madhab. I have deep respect for the Hanafi madhab. You know the one. Guarantee you this 1 gazillion%. Any graduate from a Hanafi madrasa, but he won't like it. They reduced the madhab to what their nations of the continent. While there was Hanifis in Syria, Lebanon, forgetting that Abu Hanifa wasn't Indian or Pakistani. Right? Muhammad Hassan to Imam Abu Yusuf. They both went against Yusuf was once asked, he was Jamuhu, they around him and they said, how can you go against your Imam? And Imam Abu Yusuf, Qadi Abu Yusuf, he took famously the position of Qudat, of judgehood. He was a judge in Kufa, in Iraq. And so he had a judicial position, he had a kind of like a government position, so he had reach. How could you go against your own Imam? The Imam, he said, right? I don't know. Look at Imam Abu Ja'far. But they weren't bigoted. Right? That's how the people, scholars of the madhab, they use the madhab like of their own. Who adhere to those Hanbalis, right? The of very open to somewhere closed. Like I said, Abu Hanifa's life and his madhab and his contribution to the Islam is inarguable, right? Imam Shafi'i said, كل فقيه عيال لأبي حنيفة. Every person who studies fiqh, he said, every person at the end of the day. And he's within very restricted conditions, more strict than the Imam Bukhari, except hadith. And that was because he was surrounded by the Mu'tazila. Right? In the last 18 years of his life, where he met Hamad, great Imams of Hadith, and he started reading into Hadith. His son, Hamad. I'm jumping the gun here a little bit. Right? Right? He writes a hadith book, but it's Imam Abu Dawud does it, Tirmidhi does it. And Imam Bukhari does it, but the way he does it is different from all the others. And so we'll do that when we get to it, inshallah. Like, we can talk about Imam Abu Dawud, but the restriction, we don't want to get into it. Sahl ibn Abdullah, from the great Imams of Ahlul Sunnah, comes to Imam Abu Dawud and he asks him, right? Or Imam Abu Dawud is asked, Ya Abu Dawud, هذا سهل بن عبد الله جاءني وأجلسه فقال سهل يا أبا داود لي إليك حاجة قال وما هي قال حتى تقول قضيتها مع قال نعم قال أخرج إلى لسانك الذي تحدث حتى أقبله فأخرج إليه لسانه فقبله. SubhanAllah. That story. And it sounds very odd. Translate it right now. So this great Imam, Sahl ibn Abdullah Tustari, Imam Abu Dawud. Okay? Look, Sahl ibn Abdullah has come to you. He wants to visit you. Comes him. And so Sahl ibn Abdullah, rahimahullah, O Abu Dawud, and he travels. Abu Dawud, he travels. From at this time, he's in a land outside of Iraq. He's in, I believe, border. So horses, camels, those are your modes of transportation. So he travels to either Syria or the southern border. That's a week or 2 week journey. Okay? And then he says, I have a need with you, Abu Dawud. So you might be assuming, brother, okay, you must read some hadith. Maybe. So Abu Dawud says, okay, well, this tongue of yours. Okay? Abu Dawud first says, ask whatever you want, and I'll do it as long as I can. So, whatever you need, as long as it was within my ability, I'll do it. I've been spending how many hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Let me see it. I've traveled all the way just to see your tongue. Akhrij lisanak. He said, take out your tongue. I want to see it. Akhrij lisanak. And then he said, hatta uqabbilah. Hadith of Rasulullah said, I want you to protrude your tongue so that I may kiss it. My brother, I meant to kiss what? But you're not understanding what's the motivation behind that. When I remember one of my teachers about this, I said, Shaykhana, like that's even because I'm Western, right? Those scholars that are sitting there, and the brothers who are sitting there who are from the Arab world, they all understand me, miskin, who lives in Toronto, and were bombarded by the alphabet crew, right? So our mind goes there because our minds are perverted. Nobody else asks this question. Only your miskin brother in front of you, me. So I said to the Shaykh, Shaykh, this is very inappropriate. And so Shaykh said, what do you mean? He said, another man asking another man to kiss his tongue. It's inappropriate. And he said, he smiled and he laughed. He said, you Western guys are, he's like, first of all, you're taking it literally. You're taking it what? Literally. It's not permissible for a man to kiss another man's tongue. Right? The Arabs, they have things like this. They say, yuktab bima al-ayn. This statement should be written by the water of your eyes. Right? Does that mean that they want you to now cry tears or take out the liquid and then write it? It's a way of them saying, this statement is very important. It should be written by if you have no way to write it, except by that's how important. You don't mean literally poke your eye and then write something. Yuktab bima al-dhahab. It should be written in golden ink. Is somebody going? It's a figurative what? Figurative statement, a figure of speech, right? But in this case, it says here in the narration that Abu Dawud, he taught him qabbalahu, but he did. What's narrated in the books of the Tabaqat al-Hanabila is that like this, right? And this was a way of him honoring, because Imam Sahl Abdullah Tustari, he known who he was. He was already known. Imam, he lived during the Abbasi dynasty. The leader of that time, he made 3 requests from Imam Abu Dawud. wasn't. So Iraq was a metropolis by that time. So he said, please come to Iraq. So Abu Dawud said, okay. Then he said, second request, he said, please teach my children your sunnah. So he said, first I agree, second I agree, but the third I cannot agree. I said, why not? He said, knowledge is of knowledge. For the in the dust. Khulafa used to come and sit in the dust, and then allow them to have a sitter. Why did, after all of that, why did Imam Abu the leaders, their children to come and learn? He did give them private lessons to have some privacy in the dars. And he said, look, this is the hikmah of Imam Abu Dawud. And he took this hikmah from Aisha. Right? Aisha says that the Prophet said, I was ordered to treat people according to their levels. So Abu Dawud, he mentions that, or there's mention about Abu Dawud that their children, if you have access to them, then it's dangerous. Security walking around with you all the time. Respect their privacy. A special sitter, but they still have to sit and learn, right? And it comes from the hadith that Aisha radiallahu anha, she was giving out food to the poor, and a man came, she gave him dates and bread. Another man came, she gave him dates and bread. And another man came, she gave him meat. She gave him meat and some fat, some more expensive. And so one of her, she said, Ya Abdullah, how come you gave one set of people dates and bread and you gave one man meat? And she said, bread too. Those people are fuqara. They're poor. I've been giving dates and bread to them for years. That's what they're happy with. That's what to be from times. And so I don't break his heart that I'm the thing as a faqir. So I gave him some. Look at the hikmah. The Prophet said, I was ordered according. That person wasn't used to, I would have broken his heart. If I gave him meat, he would create. So I gave the rich person what he would treat it. They're used to being hidden from hikmah. Allah to highlight this as because you know it comes prophethood. Don't sit in my desk. But they must be hidden as they're used to being hidden. In Islam, yes? Anybody know when Abu Dawud, rahimahullah ta'ala? 275. Ahsant. Died year 203 in the town of Basra, in the town of, or the city of Basra. And of course his legacy until today. أعلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
الله أكبر الله أكبر.